Man, I swear I never thought I'd be standing in the middle of my own daughter's living room, feeling like some unwanted guest in a home I basically helped build. But life's funny like that. It only takes one moment, one sentence, to flip your whole world upside down. I walked in quietly that afternoon, thinking it'd just be a normal family visit. A small gift bag in my hand, some little toys for the grandkids, a fresh pie I baked for Emily, my daughter. I mean, I was really trying, you know? Trying to be present, trying to be the easygoing mom, trying not to interfere. But the minute I stepped inside, I felt the tension. Thick, heavy, like the kind of silence that vibrates in your ribs. Everyone was already gathered in the living room. Emily, her husband Brandon, the kids playing with blocks on the floor. And her, Brandon's mother, Karen. Yeah, that Karen. She didn't even look at me at first. She just smirked, crossed her legs like she owned the damn place, and gave me that look, the one she always gave. Like she was silently saying, "Why are you even here?" I tried to ignore it. I smiled at the kids, ruffled their hair, put the gift bag down on the table. But Emily, she wouldn't look at me. She kept pacing. Her jaw was tight, her eyes red around the edges. And I instantly knew something was off. Something big. "Em?" I whispered. "Honey, what's going on?" Before she could even answer, Karen let out a loud, dramatic sigh. "Oh, please," she said. "Just tell her, Emily. She deserves to know how exhausting all of this has been." My heart dropped. Emily finally turned toward me, her chest rising and falling, like she was holding back a scream. Then she said it, loud, louder than I had ever heard her speak to anyone in her life. "Apologize to my mother-in-law, or get out of my house." The whole room froze. Brandon stood up so fast his chair hit the wall behind him. The kids stopped playing. Even Karen looked a little surprised, though she quickly hid it behind that nasty, smug smile. And me? I felt like someone had slapped me across the face. I just blinked at my daughter, stunned. "Apologize? For what?" Karen answered before she could. "For constantly making me feel unwelcome, for disrespecting me, for spreading negativity in my son's home." Negativity? I literally don't even raise my voice. Emily swallowed hard, her eyes glassy. "Mom, just apologize so we can move on. Please, this is getting out of hand." The words cut deeper than she realized. Move on? From what? From Karen's month-long campaign to paint me as some clingy, overbearing mother? From the lies she sprinkled into every conversation? From the way she twisted every small misunderstanding until Emily started doubting her own childhood? I could have argued. I could have cried. I could have walked out. But instead, something inside me just clicked. The quiet version of me, the one who kept letting things slide to keep peace, yeah, she died right there in that living room. I straightened my back, exhaled slowly, and started walking toward Karen. Everyone watched me like I was approaching a ticking bomb. Karen leaned back confidently, lifting her chin like she expected me to kneel or something. Emily whispered, "Mom, just say sorry. Please." But I didn't look at her. I kept my eyes locked on Karen. And when I finally reached her, I stopped right in front of her and said one single sentence. "You should really stop pretending, Karen. The truth has a way of crawling out, even from under all that lipstick and lies." Silence. Complete, heavy suffocating silence. Karen's smirk cracked for the first time. Brandon's eyes darted between us, like he couldn't process what just happened. Emily gasped softly, her hand flying to her mouth. But I wasn't done. Because that sentence, those words, they weren't random. They carried weight. They carried truth. Truth Karen never expected anyone else to find out. And the moment I said it, I saw it. Panic flickering right behind her eyes. That's when I knew. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining the way she manipulated my daughter. I wasn't exaggerating the way she inserted herself into every crack of their marriage. She was hiding something. Something big. And now she knew. I knew. She swallowed hard and tried to steady her voice. I don't know what you're implying. But she did. And Emily did too. Because that was the thing about lies. Once someone cracks them, you can't unhear the sound. And right there in that living room, something shifted. Their perfect little family picture, the one Karen polished and displayed for everyone to admire, started to wobble. It was the beginning of the end. They just didn't know how fast it would fall. Bite didn't move, didn't blink, didn't even breathe for a second. The silence in that living room was so thick, it felt like we were all standing underwater. Karen tried to recover first, of course. She straightened her blouse, smoothed her hair, lifted her chin. Classic, I'm still in control behavior. But her eyes, yeah, those told a whole different story. Panic. Pure panic. Emily finally found her voice. Mom, what do you mean by that? What truth? I turned to look at her. And for the first time in a long while, she actually looked unsure of her own mother-in-law. Like something inside her had finally cracked open. But before I could even speak, Karen jumped in. Oh, for heaven's sake, Emily, she barked. Your mother is just stirring up drama, again. This is what she does. Creates problems where there are none. Maybe she's lonely. Lonely. That word hit me like a slap. I opened my mouth, but Brandon beat me to it. Mom, he said sharply, looking at Karen, just let her talk. That surprised her. And me. Brandon rarely challenged his mother. Karen glared at him like she couldn't believe he dared to interrupt her royal speech. Brandon, don't start, she hissed. But before they could go back and forth, I stepped in. Emily, I said softly but firmly, before you tell me to apologize again, you need to hear what your mother-in-law has been doing behind your back. Emily looked between us, confused and scared. Doing what? Karen let out a fake laugh, the kind people do when they're 2 seconds away from cracking. This is ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. You come into my son's home and... Your son's home? I cut in. Funny. I thought it was Emily and Brandon's home. Last I checked, you don't live here. That landed harder than I expected. Karen's nostrils flared. Emily swallowed. Brandon stared at the floor, like he suddenly noticed a very interesting piece of dust. I took a slow breath and turned to my daughter. Sweetheart, do you remember last month when you called me crying because Karen told you Brandon might be second-guessing the marriage? Emily stiffened. Yeah, I remember. And do you remember, I continued, how she said she overheard Brandon on the phone with someone? That he sounded distant? Emily nodded slowly. You're saying she lied? Karen shot up from her seat. This is outrageous. I did what any concerned mother would do. Brandon wouldn't talk to her. You know that, Emily. Someone had to. I held up my hand. And that's not all. Emily, Karen told me last week that you and Brandon were thinking of moving across the country. She said Brandon wanted to, and you didn't, and that you were both fighting about it nonstop. Emily's face twisted in confusion. What? We never! Brandon, did you tell her that? Brandon's head snapped up. What? No! Mom, why would you say that? Karen stuttered. I must have misunderstood. No, I said quietly. You didn't misunderstand. You manipulated. Karen's jaw dropped. Emily's breathing sped up. Brandon looked sick. I stepped closer to Emily. Honey, your mother-in-law has been feeding you and Brandon two different stories. She tells him one thing, tells you another, and sits back while you tear each other apart. She's trying to make you depend on her instead of each other. Emily shook her head, tears pooling in her eyes. Mom, no, she wouldn't. She would, Brandon said, voice cracking. She has. Emily, my mom has done this my whole life. Karen whipped around to him. Brandon! He didn't stop. Growing up, he said quietly, she always turned me against people. Friends, girlfriends, anybody she didn't like. She'd twist things until I thought everyone was the problem except her. Emily covered her mouth with her hand. Karen looked horrified. Brandon, how dare you? Everything I ever did was to protect you. No, he said, shaking his head. Everything you ever did was to control me. Karen's face went red, full boiling kettle mode. I sacrificed my entire life for you. I raised you alone while your father ran off. And you never let me forget it, Brandon snapped. The kid, sensing the tension, quietly crawled onto the couch, eyes wide. Emily wiped her tears and looked at me again. Mom, how long have you known? I hesitated. Long enough to see the cracks. Long enough to watch Karen slowly replace me in my daughter's mind. Since the day she told me you didn't want me visiting as much, I admitted softly. You never said that, Em. But she told me you did. Emily broke. Her knees gave out, and she sat on the arm of the couch, crying into her hands. Karen rushed toward her, like she wanted to comfort her. But Brandon stepped in front of her. No, Mom, sit down. Karen froze like someone hit her with a stun gun. I walked over and sat beside my daughter. Sweetheart, I whispered, holding her hand. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to tell you the truth. Emily leaned her head on my shoulder, sobbing softly. And right there, right in that moment, I felt the shift. The house wasn't fully broken yet, but the cracks, they were no longer invisible. Emily's sobs weren't loud, but they were the kind that hit you in the chest like a brick. The kind that come from realizing someone you trusted, someone you defended, someone you practically worshipped, had been playing you the whole damn time. Her shoulders shook against me, and I wrapped an arm around her, letting her cry it out. Karen stood frozen across the room, looking like someone had unplugged her entire personality. Her mouth was open, but no sound came out, as if she suddenly forgot how words worked. Brandon kept his position between Karen and Emily, jaw tight, fists clenched, like he was finally done being his mother's puppet. I rubbed Emily's back gently. Baby, breathe. I'm right here. She wiped her face with trembling hands. Mom, why would she do this to us? Why would she want us to fight? Karen jolted back to life. Emily, That's not true. I never tried to make you fight. I only said what I said because I was worried. Oh, cut the crap, Brandon snapped. It was the most emotion I had ever heard in his voice. Mom, you've been meddling since day one. You lied to me, you lied to Emily, and you used every little insecurity to keep yourself in the center of everything. Karen's voice cracked. I did it for you! No, he said again, firmer. You did it because you can't stand not being in control. Karen flinched. Emily sniffed and finally looked up, eyes red and raw. Karen, did you really tell my mom that I didn't want her coming around? That question hit harder than anything so far. Karen's eye darted. Her lips parted. For a second, I swear I saw guilt. Real guilt. But then, like always, she shoved it down and replaced it with attitude. I told her what I thought was best, she said stiffly. You needed space. You were stressed. I was trying to help. Emily stared at her like she'd never seen her before. That wasn't your decision to make, she whispered. You don't get to control my relationship with my own mother. Karen looked away, jaw twitching. And did you tell Brandon, Emily continued, that I was unhappy in the marriage and thinking about leaving him? Karen's head shot to Brandon. Her eyes widened like she'd been caught stealing from a church donation box. I only mentioned it because you two were arguing that week. We argued about laundry, Brandon fired back. Laundry? And suddenly you're telling people my wife wants to leave me? Karen's lips trembled. Emily shook her head slowly, heartbreak creeping across her face. Karen, why? Finally, Karen snapped. Because you were taking him away from me, she screamed. Silence! The kids froze on the couch. Even the damn refrigerator seemed to stop humming. Karen's breathing was shaky, her voice loud and desperate. I raised him alone. I gave everything I had, and when you came along, suddenly I wasn't needed anymore. Suddenly I wasn't the center of his world. Brandon's voice was barely a whisper. Mom, I got married. That's how life works. No, Karen shouted, tears streaming now. You changed after marrying her. You stopped calling me every day. You stopped asking for my advice. You started choosing her family over me. Emily gasped. That's not true. Karen pointed at her with shaking hands. Yes, it is. You took him. You took my son. Brandon pinched the bridge of his nose, a long exhale shaking out of him. Mom, I'm not a child anymore. I'm a husband. Karen's voice dropped into a broken whisper. That's what scares me. For a moment, everything was still, like the air in the room froze. Then Emily finally spoke. Karen, you didn't lose Brandon. Her voice was soft, shaky, but honest. You just didn't want to share him. Karen blinked hard, tears dripping off her chin. I placed my hand on Emily's knee and gently squeezed. She leaned against me again like she finally felt safe. Karen looked at me with pure bitterness. You think you're better than me, don't you? I lifted my chin. No, I know this. I don't manipulate my children to keep them close. Karen's face twisted, somewhere between pain and rage. Brandon finally stepped forward. His voice was controlled, almost too calm. Mom, you need help. Karen gasped like he'd stabbed her. You're choosing her over me? She cried. I'm choosing my wife, he replied firmly. And I'm choosing my family. Karen stumbled back a step, like the floor dropped beneath her. Emily took a deep breath, wiped her cheeks, and stood up, still shaky but stronger than before. "What happens next," she said quietly, "depends on whether you're willing to stop controlling our lives." Karen's lip quivered, but she said nothing. The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was revealing. I don't think I'll ever forget the look on Karen's face after Brandon told her she needed help. It wasn't anger anymore. It wasn't even sadness. It was fear. Real, bone-deep fear. Like she finally realized the little tower of control she spent years building was cracking brick by brick. Emily sat down beside me, still shaky, still wiping away tears. I brushed her hair gently behind her ear, the way I used to when she scraped her knee as a kid. She leaned into me without hesitation. That told me everything. My daughter was finally coming back to herself. Across the room, Karen took a step forward, then back, like she couldn't decide whether to fight or fold. "Brandon," she whispered, "you don't mean that. Sweetie, I'm your mother." Brandon clenched his jaw. You could see the internal war happening behind his eyes. But he didn't budge. "I do mean it, Mom," he said quietly. "And you being my mother doesn't give you the right to sabotage my life." That word, sabotage, hit her hard. Her chin quivered. Her eyes darted between the three of us, like we'd all betrayed her at once. Then she did what manipulators always do when cornered. She switched tactics. Her whole posture softened, her voice tiny and wounded. "If I've overstepped, it's only because I love you. I didn't realize you all hated me this much." Emily rolled her eyes so sharply, I felt it in my own skull. "No one hates you," Emily said. "But we can't keep living under your rules. Brandon and I have our own household, our own kids, our own life." Karen hugged herself tightly. "But I was only trying to help." I took a deep breath and leaned forward. "That's the thing, Karen. You weren't helping, you were controlling, and there's a big difference." Her face hardened again. "This is none of your business," she snapped. Emily immediately shot up. "Yes, it is. She's my mother, and you've been treating her like trash since the day you met her." Karen's eyes went wide, insulted. "Emily, I've never treated her like—" "Karen," I cut in calmly, "I've been nothing but respectful to you. But every time I walk in this house, you make me feel like I'm intruding. Every word you accidentally twist, every suggestion you whisper behind my back, you've been trying to isolate Emily from me." Emily nodded. Brandon stayed silent. But oh boy, that silence said a lot. Karen pressed her palm to her forehead like she was the victim of some great tragedy. "This is a misunderstanding." Emily's shoulders slumped. "No, it's not, and you know it." For a moment, no one said anything. Then Brandon cleared his throat and spoke again. Slow, careful, exhausted. "Mom, you told me last month that Emily was too depressed to take care of the kids. You said you'd take them for a few days to give her a break." Emily's eyes snapped toward him. "She what?" Brandon nodded. "And you told Emily that I was thinking about separating because I needed space." Emily gasped. "Oh my God." "And," Brandon continued, "you told my kids that their mom cries because she's scared of messing up." Emily covered her mouth. Her voice cracked. "She said what to them?" Karen stumbled backward, like she was being attacked. I didn't mean... I was just trying to prepare them. For what? I asked sharply. For a divorce you were trying to create? Karen stayed silent, and that silence said enough. Emily shook her head in disbelief. I can't believe this. All this time, I thought, maybe I was overreacting. Maybe I was the problem. But it wasn't me. It was you. Karen's breathing quickened. That's not fair. I was trying to protect my family. You were the threat to the family, Emily said, voice trembling with fury. Karen's lip wobbled again. Brandon, sweetheart, don't you see what they're doing? They're turning you against me. No, he said firmly. You turned me against yourself. Karen finally broke. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but they weren't the soft kind. They were wild, panicked, messy. She sank onto the couch, clutching her hair. I didn't want to lose you, she whispered. I didn't want to be alone. And there it was, the truth behind the chaos. Not hate, not malice, fear. Fear of being replaced. Fear of becoming irrelevant. Fear of losing the only person she ever had complete control over. Emily sat down slowly, her anger softening into something more empathetic. Karen, you're not losing us. You just can't keep us chained. Karen looked up at her, eyes red, face blotchy. But how do I stop? She whispered. And that was the first honest question she'd asked all night. I exhaled slowly. By admitting you need help, and actually getting it. Everyone held their breath. Even the kids peered quietly from the hallway. Karen wiped her face with shaking hands. I don't know if I can. Then we'll help you, Brandon said. But not like this. Not with lies, not with manipulation, and definitely not with you controlling all of us. Karen didn't look convinced, but she didn't fight it either. Sometimes that's the closest thing to progress you get. Karen didn't move at first. She just sat there, her hands trembling, mascara smudged to hell, staring down at the rug, like it suddenly had all the answers she'd been avoiding for years. Brandon exhaled slowly. Emily leaned against me, still processing everything that had been dropped on her in the last hour. And Karen whispered, barely audible, "What if I don't know who I am without being needed?" Bro, that line hit the room like a slow-motion explosion. Emily's eyes softened, Brandon's jaw unclenched. Not the villain twisting reality, just a woman who'd been terrified of becoming irrelevant. Emily slid her hands across her lap. Her voice came out softer than I expected. Karen, you are needed, but you can't make yourself the center of everybody's life by force. That's not love. That's fear wearing a mask. Karen swallowed hard, blinking fast. You think I don't know that? She burst. Do you think I wanted to become this clingy, paranoid version of myself? Her voice cracked. She covered her mouth with her hand, shoulders shaking. The thing is, manipulators rarely break open honestly. But when they do, it's messy and real and confusing as hell. Brandon sat on the coffee table across from her, hands clasped. You could have talked to me, Mom. Just actually talked to me. She shook her head. No. If I told you I felt lonely or scared, you'd tell me to get a hobby or meet new people. You don't understand what it's like. You grew up. You built a family. You moved forward. Meanwhile, I'm stuck in the same empty house every day, hoping someone needs me enough to come back. Emily whispered, Karen. But Karen kept going. Do you know how pathetic it feels to realize you're no one's first call? No one's emergency contact? No one's priority? The only time people visit is when something's wrong. I didn't want to be disposable. And damn, that hurt to hear. Because under all that toxicity, under all the messing around, under all the manipulation, was a simple, painful truth. She didn't want to be alone. Emily reached out hesitantly. You're not disposable, but you can't hold people hostage with guilt. And you can't pit us against each other just to feel important. Karen wiped her nose with her sleeve. Real glamorous moment, then looked straight at me. And you, she whispered. Oh boy, here we go. I was jealous of you, she admitted. Emily and Brandon both snapped their heads toward her like she'd just dropped a bomb. Jealous of me. I knew Emily loved you. I knew Brandon respected you. And I felt like you had something I didn't. Real connection. I thought if I pushed you out, the space you left would, I don't know, fill with me. For a second, I didn't even know what to say, because I never expected that honesty to come from her. I inhaled slowly. Karen, you don't replace love by eliminating competition. You build it by showing up in the right ways. Not louder, not harsher, just genuinely. She stared at me, eyes glassy, breathing uneven. I don't know how to do that, she admitted. Emily reached for her hand this time, not out of obligation, but out of actual empathy. We'll teach you, but you need to want to learn. And you've got to go to therapy. Real therapy. Not those Facebook groups you always quote. Karen snorted through her tears. Those are mom support groups. Brandon shook his head. They're echo chambers for people who think boundaries is a dirty word. Karen actually laughed, a small, tired, sad laugh. You're not wrong. The tension in the room loosened. Not gone, not magically fixed, but loosened. Progress. Karen wiped her face again and looked at the three of us. Okay, she whispered. I'll go. I'll get help. Emily blinked in surprise. You will? Yes, Karen said, nodding slowly. Not because you're forcing me. Not because I'm scared, but because I'm tired. I'm tired of fighting the people I love the most. And that right there, that hit different. Brandon stood up, stepped forward, and hugged her. Not tightly, not warmly, but enough. The room fell into a sigh of relief. Emily leaned into me again. Mom, we might actually get through this. I wrapped an arm around her shoulders. We will. Because for the first time, she's actually listening. Across the room, Karen's voice cracked again as she whispered into Brandon's shoulder. I'm scared, but I'm trying. And honestly, for someone like her, that was a bigger step than anything else she'd said tonight. Karen pulled away from Brandon's shoulder. Her eyes still glossy, but her breathing steadier now. For a second, the living room felt weirdly calm, like the storm had finally stopped screaming, but the clouds were still hovering. Emily wiped her face and sat up straighter. You okay? She asked gently. Karen nodded, but the nod was shaky. Yeah, She paused, like her brain hit a glitch. I just needed to say it out loud. Brandon sat next to her, elbows on his knees. Good. That's the first step. But in my gut, something felt off. A little too quiet, a little too sudden. Like Karen was still holding on to something. And boy, I was right. Karen sniffed, wiped her eyes again, then said it. I just didn't want her to take him away from me the way she took Daniel. Emily blinked. Brandon froze. My stomach dropped. Hold on, I said carefully. What do you mean, the way she took Daniel? Karen's eyes widened, like she realized she'd stepped on a landmine. I didn't mean, forget it. No, Brandon cut in, his tone sharp but not yelling. Mom, explain, now. Karen swallowed, her fingers twisted in her lap. She looked everywhere except at us. It was nothing, she insisted weakly. I just meant she influenced him, that's all. Emily leaned forward, voice calm but firm. Who influenced Daniel, Karen? Silence. Karen's jaw clenched. Her eyes went glassy again. Not from sadness this time, but from panic. Mom, Brandon said, leaning closer. What are you not telling us about Daniel? She shook her head furiously. Nothing. I don't want to talk about it. Too late, I said softly. You opened the door. Just finish it. Karen's breathing sped up. Her voice dropped to a whisper. There were things Daniel didn't want anyone to know. Emily exhaled sharply. What things? Karen's eyes flicked to the hallway, like she expected Daniel to walk out of it, even though he'd been gone for years. Secrets, she said. Stuff he trusted me with. Stuff I promised I'd never repeat. Brandon rubbed his face. Mom, if those secrets explain why you've been acting like this for years, we need to know. Karen shut her eyes tight, and then she whispered the sentence that snapped the entire night in half. Daniel wasn't the man you think he was. Emily sat back slowly. What does that mean? Karen hesitated. Then the words spilled out, like she'd been holding them under pressure for years. He wasn't faithful. Emily's mouth opened. Brandon's head dropped into his hands. I felt my chest tighten. Karen kept talking, her voice trembling. He cheated. More than once. With more than one woman. Emily shook her head violently. No, Daniel loved you. Karen laughed bitterly. No, he loved the idea of me. The loyal wife. The stable home. The woman who would never leave. Brandon whispered, Mom, why didn't you ever tell us? Because I didn't want you to hate him, she snapped. He was still your father. I didn't want to destroy the image you had of him. Emily's eyes welled up. So instead, you destroyed us? Karen froze. Emily didn't raise her voice. Not once. But the disappointment in her tone cut way deeper than yelling ever could. You protected a dead man's reputation more than your living family, she said softly. You let his secrets turn you bitter, paranoid, territorial. And you never gave us a chance to understand why. Karen's chin trembled. I'm sorry. I didn't want to be the villain. I locked eyes with her. Karen, secrets don't protect people. They poison the ones who hold them. Karen buried her face in her hands. I spent years trying to be enough for him. Years trying to make him stay. When he died, I told myself I'd never let another woman take someone away from me again. Emily's expression softened, but her eyes stayed sad. So you clung to us, she whispered, even when it hurt us. Karen nodded slowly. I know. I know I messed everything up. I know I became controlling. But I didn't want to feel that empty again. And damn, for all the chaos she caused, that vulnerability felt painfully real. Brandon scooted closer and put a hand on her back. Mom, we're sorry you went through that, but you can't keep burying pain and expecting it not to grow teeth. Karen let out a shaky breath. I know. Emily wiped a tear. So what now? Karen looked up, eyes swollen, voice small. Now, I tell the truth. All of it. No more hiding. I nodded. Good. Because that's the real first step. The entire house felt different. Not healed, not fixed, but finally honest. And Karen, she looked like a woman who'd been holding her breath for decades and finally exhaled. Karen sat there, wiping her face with the sleeve of her sweater, like she was trying to erase years of damage with one motion. But the thing about truth, once you let it out, it starts flipping furniture on its way through the room. Brandon leaned back, exhaling like he'd been punched. Emily stared at the floor, twisting a loose thread on the couch cushion. Me? I was just watching Karen, really watching her, for the first time in a long while. She wasn't the arrogant, overbearing, territorial mother-in-law anymore. She looked small, tired, cracked open. But messy honesty always comes with aftershocks. Emily lifted her head, her eyes still glassy but steady. So, if you've been carrying all that alone, she said slowly, why didn't you ask us for help? Or even tell us how bad it was? Karen shook her head, staring down at her hands. Because I didn't want to be pitied, and I didn't want you looking at Daniel differently. Brandon scoffed, not angry, just incredulous. Mom, you really thought we'd rather live in a fake world than understand you? Karen glanced at him. You adored your father. You both did. Emily blinked hard, like she was fighting back another round of tears. And we still could have, even if we knew he wasn't perfect. Karen swallowed. That wasn't a risk I could take. Her voice cracked on the last word. I leaned forward. Karen, protecting someone's memory shouldn't require destroying yourself or everyone around you. She didn't argue. She just looked exhausted. And then Brandon asked the question nobody wanted, but everybody knew was coming. Mom, were you ever gonna tell us? Or were you planning to take all this to your grave? Karen's lips parted. Her shoulders tightened. A shadow crossed her face. I honestly thought I would, she whispered. I thought if I just pretended long enough, the past would stay buried. Emily tilted her head. And did it? Karen gave a broken laugh. No, it rotted, and it made me rot with it. That one hit deep. Even Emily stopped picking at the couch thread. There was a weird quiet, but not awkward, just heavy. Emily was the one who finally broke it. What exactly did Daniel do? She asked, voice steady. Karen let out a long breath, like she was releasing something she'd been holding on to way too tight. He cheated with a coworker first, she said. Then someone he met through his gym. Then online. I don't even know how many times. I stopped counting after the third one. Emily's face crumpled. Emily finally stood up. Not fast, not angry. Just a slow rise. like her knees had turned weak. She walked to the window, arms folded tight around herself, staring outside like the world looked different now. "Emily?" Karen whispered. Emily didn't turn around. "You know what hurts?" she said in a voice that wasn't yelling, but felt sharper than screaming. "You let your pain turn into walls around us." Karen froze. "You shut us out," Emily continued, "and then punished us for not understanding what you wouldn't let us understand." Karen's breath hitched. I know I did that." "And then," Emily said, finally turning, "you tried to control everything. Our marriage, our home, me, like you were trying to rewrite a pain that had nothing to do with me." Brandon reached for her hand. She let him take it, but didn't take her eyes off Karen. Karen looked shattered. "I'm sorry," she whispered again, voice trembling. "I didn't realize how much I was dragging you into my darkness." "But you were," Emily said softly, "and we can't pretend you weren't." Brandon stood too, not in anger, just to reposition himself closer to both women. "Mom," he said, his tone calmer now, "you can't fix what happened back then, but you can stop letting it shape everything now." Karen bit her lip. "What if I don't know how?" "That's why you talk," I said gently. "Not to be pitied, to be understood." Karen's shoulders slumped. "I want that." Emily stepped closer, not hugging, not forgiving, but closing the distance. "That's a start," she said quietly. Karen nodded, and for the first time all night, she looked ready to face the wreckage instead of hiding under it. Karen sat back down slowly, like her legs couldn't quite remember how to hold her up. Emily stood a few feet away, arms wrapped around herself, breathing unevenly, but calmer than before. Brandon hovered between them, torn, but finally understanding both sides. The storm in the room wasn't raging anymore, but it was still humming under the walls like leftover thunder. I knew this was the moment. The moment everything either breaks or finally starts healing. So I stood, quiet, straight, no shaking, no softening. Karen looked up at me, eyes red, hope flickering behind the exhaustion. Hope that maybe I'd say something comforting, something gentle, something that helped her patch things over. But patchwork wasn't gonna cut it. Not anymore. Emily's breathing slowed. Brandon shifted his weight. Karen whispered, What did you want to say?" I took a deep breath. Not angry, not vengeful. Just done with the hiding, the circling, the pretending. "Karen," I said, locking eyes with her, "you don't get to rewrite the damage just because you finally decided to acknowledge it." Silence. Dead, heavy, absolute silence. The sentence hit the air like a hammer to glass. Karen blinked fast, stunned. Emily froze. Brandon's eyes widened just slightly. But nobody spoke, because they knew, every single one of them, that it was the truth. Slowly, her expression cracked. Not offended, not angry, just hit. Hit in a way people only get hit when the truth finally lines up with something they've been running from for years. Her lips trembled. She opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. You've been hurting, I continued, softer now. I get that. We all get that. But that pain doesn't undo the way you treated Emily. It doesn't uncontrol the controlling. It doesn't erase the comments, the pressure, the boundaries you bulldozed. Karen swallowed hard. And it definitely doesn't mean Emily owes you an apology, I added. Emily inhaled sharply. Karen's shoulders caved in, like she'd finally realized she wasn't the only one who had been bleeding in this family. Emily stepped closer, not enough to comfort, but no longer as far away. Mom, she said quietly, I never wanted you to be the villain in my marriage. Karen covered her face with both hands. I'm not a villain, she whispered through her fingers. I'm just tired. So tired of pretending I'm okay. You don't need to pretend anymore, Brandon said gently. But pretending isn't your excuse, I added. Karen looked up at me with tear-blurred eyes. So what do I do now? That depends, I said. Are you asking how to repair this, or how to make yourself feel better about what happened? Karen froze. Because she knew the difference. We all did. Emily's voice softened, almost like she was afraid of breaking something fragile. If you want to repair it, she said, you start by actually seeing me. Not the daughter-in-law you were scared I'd replace. Not a reminder of the woman Dad cheated with. Not a threat. Just me. Karen let out a shaky breath. I can do that. I want to do that. Good, Emily whispered. But it starts with you owning everything. Not part of it. Not the pieces that make you look better. All of it. Karen nodded slowly. I understand. For the first time, she meant it. Brandon finally sat down, elbows on his knees. I'm not gonna lie, he said. Hearing all this hurts like hell. Knowing who Dad really was. Knowing what you survived. Knowing we were living in a version of truth that wasn't even close to reality. Karen turned toward him, guilt washing over her face. I never wanted you to hate him. I don't, Brandon said immediately. But I needed the truth. We both did. Emily nodded. And we needed you to stop carrying it alone, she added. Karen wiped her cheeks. I didn't realize how heavy I'd become. For all of you. I sat back down, letting the weight settle. You can rebuild this, I said, but it's not gonna happen in one night. Not with one apology, not with one confession. It's a process, and it only works if you stop sliding backward. Karen exhaled shakily. I'm ready, she said, and for once, nobody doubted her. Emily stepped forward fully this time and gently touched her hand. Then let's start. Slowly, honestly. No more secrets. Karen nodded. Brandon placed a hand on both their shoulders. And it wasn't perfect. It wasn't clean or pretty or magically healed. But it was real. Real for the first time in years. As everything settled, Karen looked at me again. Thank you, she whispered, for saying the thing I didn't want to hear. I gave a small smile. Sometimes the truth doesn't fix everything, but it stops everything from getting worse. She nodded, and finally, the room breathed again.